And there's only a few slides this week. I don't want to go through a lot of content. I was thinking that it would be helpful to take our time and kind of pause at many of the different slides. So to start, the land acknowledgement. I am in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And maybe you know the land that you're on, and maybe that's something that you're curious about. You could look it up, but this is where I am. I'm in Mi'kma'ki. So this focus today is on practicing peace. So there's 3 quotes that I wanted to, or 3 spiritual teachers that I wanted to start with. So Joanna Macy is someone that we worked with for the last couple of weeks. She's a long-time Buddhist and peace activist, environmental activist as well. And she does something called the work that reconnects. She's managed to stay steady and hopeful and optimistic and engaged through decades of this kind of work. And her approach is about helping people make friends with uncertainty and reframe it as a way of coming alive. What is it that comes up for you when you think about that? I don't know what's going to happen. So part of what she said is you're alive with all of the others in this present moment. The truth unlocks your heart. It's one of the things that we all experience, and this is a lot to, courtesy of the primitive brain and our survival system, is that we don't really feel as steady and as comfortable when we're not sure what's going to happen. So we have a lot of different ways that we protect ourselves from uncertainty. I remember talking with a woman a while ago about traveling, and she said one of the things she just loved about traveling and really misses during COVID is that she never knew it was going to happen. She would just go, and who was she going to meet, and who was she going to talk to? What kind of conversation would she have? What would she see? And there was an excitement around the uncertainty and the newness of the moment. She didn't know what was going to go on. And I think that's probably part of the reason why I'm not as much of a traveler. I like that in a way, but it makes me kind of uncomfortable. So we don't know what's happening in the world. We do know that with the environmental crisis, there's a lot of uncertainty and fear. So that's something we do know. What comes up in your body, your breath? And this last sentence of hers, this last paragraph, I see a readiness to experience a collective awakening. I'm astonished by how explicit this is. It's a sense of wanting to belong to the earth, aching for reverence for the earth. I feel that too. I'm sure many of us here do, and yet that's not how we generally, as an entire culture, live our lives, especially in the Western world. Many people live in cities. Many people never have the opportunity to really get out into nature. And so it never has a chance to become familiar. And it's really easy to stay disconnected. So sit with that just for a minute. Look into her eyes. I think she's got such a peace in her face. Here's someone who hasn't disconnected, who's stayed very connected. And one of the motivations for her, she says, is so that when things fall apart, which they will, in many different ways, they're always falling apart, that we won't turn on each other. So when we think about all of the work that we do with our nervous system, and as our nervous system gets engaged and we go into fight, flight, freeze, we turn on each other. That's the way it is. We're acting from our animal self. And in order to act from our human hearts, our openness, our kindness, our connectedness, we need to be able to come out of fight, flight, freeze and into a more of a trust and connect social engagement. Pema Chödrön is the queen of when things fall apart. She has many books and audio series, and she's a wonderful teacher around this and how we try to really grab on to what helps us feel a little bit more secure. She's a big proponent of kindness and compassion. If one wishes suffering not to happen to the people on the earth, it begins with a kind heart. Every day we could ask ourselves, am I going to add to the aggression in the world? Am I going to practice peace or am I going to war? So again, let's pause here for a couple of minutes and just see what comes up. What are the thoughts that come up? One of the things that many people really enjoy about her teaching is that she's really down to earth and practical, and she doesn't hide how hard things are for her at times. Am I going to add to the aggression? Am I going to practice peace or am I going to war? And right now, as we're seeing the news out of Afghanistan, that's probably something that's on our mind in a kind of a obvious way, practicing war. And there's a real beginning point of this in our own minds. So this is my meditation teacher, Swami Veda. He says the only answer to all tragic events in human history and future is that all violence, economic, religious, political, all the different types of violence must be stopped individually, starting from individual minds. And how can I individually stop this ongoing violence? From this moment forward, examine the seeds of violence in your mind. So earlier today, I was reflecting on two families that were across the hall from me in the hotel that I'm in right now. I'm on vacation. And how noisy they were being and not really thinking about how that noise was affecting other people around them. And so one of the thoughts that comes up, of course, is entitlement, unconsciousness, that they were not considering the other people. And also, what was coming up for me was how much they were enjoying each other. So I think it was like a grandparent. Some of the kids were younger, and there were some older adults and some looked like parents. And they were all really enjoying being with each other. And so to bring that to mind was one way that I could, in that moment, stop the violence in my mind. And we all have so many examples of that. Just these little things that really contribute to an atmosphere of peace and kindness and compassion and happiness for other people's happiness. Even though it was a little bit difficult for me, it wasn't that bad. Annoying, maybe more than anything. But even that, if we work with it, we have many, many opportunities to work with the violence in our mind at this level. These small irritations that happen all the time. We feel uncomfortable. There's some small transgression. And then what do? The one thing we could do is judge ourselves for having that come up. That's not very productive, of course. We could be kind with ourselves, like, wow, there we go. Here's an opportunity. I could let this go. I could cultivate happiness for them. It's not a big deal. And other times we can't let it go so easily. It's higher stakes. And the other thing that he talks about, and he talked about a lot, was to deepen your meditation and develop the capacity to not be ruffled by other people. So to absorb the negativity of others, even without even a ripple on the surface of your own mind. So these are advanced practices. These are people who have done this for decades and have a lot of equanimity and who have a lot to share about it. So a couple of quotes from Pema. I've learned so much from her over the years, starting from cassette tapes. So it was a long time ago, probably the 80s, 90s. If we open our hearts, anyone, including the people who drive us crazy, can be our teachers. And then to reframe this whole experience of being irritated and triggered and the hardness and shakiness of human life is that really is fertile ground for spiritual growth and awakening. If everything was just lovely all the time, we'd just be enjoying the loveliness, but it's not. So her question is, it's not how we avoid uncertainty and fear, but how we relate to discomfort. So again, let's pause here for a minute and just kind of sit with that. How do I relate to discomfort? And you might bring up something that you have experienced that made you uncomfortable, or maybe it was physical, like your body was too hot or you were tired or hungry or something like that. How do you relate to discomfort? And what goes on in your mind? Maybe it's something a bit higher stakes. Maybe it's social anxiety when you get into a certain company of people. You feel like they have contempt for you or that you don't fit in. And then what does your mind do if you were to bring that forward? There's a discomfort here. You don't feel safe and settled. So what do you do then? What happens in your mind? And part of what we might be witnessing is going into fight, flight, freeze. Even just bringing up a thought about something is very powerful in our nervous system. So that might be what we're experiencing. Our system is going into fight, flight, freeze, and then we're breathing because we're doing it as a practice. We can kind of freeze frame the memory for a minute, regulate our system, come back. And one of the very common patterns that happens in the mind is that we get angry with the person or a situation that's made us feel this way. So notice if there's anything like that. Could be something like, well, that person thinks they're better than I am. Or what is this, junior high? Why are they acting that way? Can't they see that it's making me feel left out? So notice the grumbling in your mind, whether it's kind of extreme, we can see it easier, but also there might be other kind of complaining thoughts or grumbling thoughts or projection, or there might be some kind of inner critic thing going on too. That's also another pattern. Well, what's the matter with you that you can't even relax here and enjoy this dinner with your family? Just give it another minute or two. Just really notice what's happening. Steady yourself with your breath. And then come back to this statement about fertile ground for spiritual growth and awakening. For me, that's helpful to frame what we're going through and the work that we do is that it has a point. And one of the real benefits of doing this kind of work is that we become free from some of this irritation and the way that people rub against us. We relate in a different way. So let's pause here and just notice, where are you on the ladder, the polyvagal ladder? So dorsal vagal at the bottom, we're kind of shut down, we're disconnected. Sympathetic is fight or flight. So we're in that kind of grumbling, complaining part of the mind. Oftentimes that's a fight response. A flight can be something similar. It can be we've just kind of disengaged. Maybe we're checking our phone or doing something else. So what is your mind and inner critic telling you? I'm not powerful enough. This is too much to ask. Here she is giving us these 3 examples of people who have been doing this for decades, and they're obviously very advanced. I can't do this. And even if I could, what's the difference? I'm just one person. I'm not going to make that much of a difference. I can't even stop being angry when someone cuts me off in traffic, let alone really work with wishing my enemies peace. How's that going to be? So let's sit with that for a minute and kind of, so not to necessarily be doing the inquiry now, but just kind of reviewing what came up during the last several minutes. What kind of defenses are going on in your mind? And if you feel like it would be helpful, you could stand and shake it out. And just stand and do a minute or 2 of shaking. You could do a breathing practice, tapping. What did you learn in the last several minutes about your responses in this moment in time? It's not the way it is all the time. And then to see what's your response to, I am open to the possibility of staying connected and engaged. It is enough for me to do my part. And what is your response to that? Does it feel true? You might want to center your attention in your heart. I can stay connected and engaged. And there's a lot around doing our own part. We know that when a lot of people get together, we have a lot of power to change things. So we're not alone in this. And one of the ways that we feel not so alone is we engage in inquiry, but also we talk with each other. Maybe get involved in some groups that are taking action, or there's a whole bunch of different ways that we could do that. But it starts with this willingness in our heart. And in order to even think that it's a good idea, to do our part or stay connected, engaged, we have to have an openness around that. We have to have some kind of confidence that we can do it and that it will be a good thing. So, one of the ways that you could do this is to bring up a couple of different visualizations, and not just in the mind, but feeling them in the body. So, when you think about times that someone offered a kindness to you, just really bring it to mind vividly. Feel it in your body. Bring the person's face to mind, maybe, or maybe it was someone in a drive-through that offered to buy your coffee or whatever. Maybe it was a person on the street who smiled when you were feeling kind of down. There's all kinds of times when people have being kind. You could work with many different ones. Just see what comes in and just breathe. Let your attention stay steady. And notice what it feels like in your body. There's a softening, usually, an open heartedness. And then let's let that come to rest. And then think of times when you offloaded your frustration on somebody. And what happened then? How does that feel in your body? We don't have to go too intently into this, but just something small, even. When you were rude to someone in a restaurant or a store, when you put your foot on the gas and sped around somebody who was slowing you down. Or maybe it was something more serious. Maybe you have a pretty strong fight response. And when you feel like that, you tend to kind of yell at somebody or say something cutting. And as you're looking at that and paying attention to it, how does that feel in your body? Remain really connected with your breath. And this moment in time, we're just having a look for a moment. There might be certain thoughts in your mind. And then deep breath, let that one go. And one of the things that's interesting about this is that we all have all of these experiences. No one has only one kind and never has the other. So now bring to mind sometimes when you were able to stay grounded and steady, when somebody needed your attention and you were able to really give that to them. And this could be many, many different situations at work or home or family, or maybe you were able to give that to yourself. Think of it many, many times, maybe a half a dozen times at least. And just notice, okay, there was that time when this, and feel it in your body. I was offering my kind attention to somebody, whether they were able to accept it or not. Just I was feeling open hearted and kind. Notice your whole body. And then let's finish with this. I cultivate being kind, connected, and open hearted so that when things fall apart, I won't turn on people. I won't turn on myself, and I won't turn on others. Bring your attention into your heart center. Let yourself feel that. Stay with that for a couple of minutes. Notice what it feels like in your heart center and then in your whole body. I cultivate being kind, connected, and open-hearted. And then when you're ready, come back to the group.